on, collectors? This is Parlay Jay here with you today. And on today's episode, I'm going to share my thoughts on the fallout from COVID-19. Now, if you watched my video prior to the COVID-19 outbreak, actually just when it began, you saw my viewpoints and thoughts on where this would take the hobby, where this would take collectors. And I was pretty positive on where it would take us. And there were a lot of detractors out there that thought differently and thought this was the end of the hobby as we know it. Well, folks, I was right so far. Fingers crossed on that one. I want to talk about 6 reasons why the hobby didn't disintegrate, deteriorate, go away, but actually exponentially grew during the global pandemic. Now, before I get into the 6, a lot of folks like to liken the hobby to the stock market. And so there's one thing that you can do, and you can see that there was a point in time where the hobby did start to slightly decline, just like I anticipated in my prior video. But then I said that there would be a very strong rebound. And just like the stock market, there was a very strong rebound. The stock market itself has actually been on its highest run in years. And the hobby has been gradually increasing over the last couple months since March, when the COVID-19 outbreak was most prevalent and really began. So let's talk about the top 6 reasons why the hobby not only survived, but thrived during the global pandemic. Number 1 is boredom. So you had folks just like you and I who were on lockdown, who in some cases couldn't work anymore. If you did work and you were lucky enough to have a job where you could work from home, you worked from home. If you were one of the folks that were our first responders and you had to work, first of all, thank you for that. Second of all, this may not have applied to you, but the vast majority, I would say, probably did suffer from a bit of boredom. And it's not only around work, it's around after work. So you've now lost the ability to go out, to go on vacation, to go down the block, to go into a store, because everything in the world was shut down and you were on house arrest essentially and lockdown. And so what did we all do? We all used the internet a hell of a lot more. We text messaged. The growth of video chat, Zoom, Google Duo, all these things became super prevalent. And without the internet, none of this could have been possible. So the boredom factor really came into play here, because now as a collector, you couldn't go and buy packs. You couldn't go down to the store. You couldn't go to a card show. You couldn't trade with friends. You couldn't do any of those things. What you could do was go on eBay and buy cards. And at the beginning, you were able to buy cards at a lower price because there was that general decline in card values in March. And so that is definitely a major contributing factor. People being home, having really nothing else to do, and going on eBay and going on the internet, going on all of these platforms where you can buy and sell cards became even more popular. Number 2, with baseball not being in play and us losing as fans of the hobby, the ongoing season and turn of events that affect card values, whether positively or negatively, this time period actually gave us a time to broaden our horizons a bit. And you saw cards in the junk wax era, cards that everybody thought were pretty much shot and were not going to get value. They were overproduced. Everybody had them. You started seeing those cards increase in value and increase in demand. And there was a lot of contributing factors to that. And that was because it gave us the opportunity to look at things other than ultra modern cards and ultra modern players, because we didn't have that constant daily news effect and performance effect of all different players and their performance and trades and things happening in the media. So it gave us a chance to kind of look back at an older generation of cards. And a lot of folks in the hobby are in the, between, I'd say 30 to upper 40s, 50s, obviously it spans everything, but there's a good, cross section of folks that are in that age range that did grow up in the junk wax era. And now getting back into the hobby, you know, maybe with your kids and trying to get them into the hobby or having them enjoy it, kind of brings you back, and it gives you that opportunity for that, you know, Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck rookie that you always wanted as a kid, or you maybe had one and lost it. Now you might want to go and buy that PSA 10. Maybe that Mark McGwire 1985 USA Team Topps card that you had 20 of as a kid that are now gone. Now as a collector in the hobby, you want to go and buy that PSA 10 because you can. You have income, you're older now, you have disposable income where you can afford it maybe. And so it really gave us that opportunity to pause on the ultra modern, which occupies us so much. Ronald Acuña's, and the Pete Alonso's, and the Vlad Guerreros, and all these kinds of players took a little bit of a back seat for a while. And it let us span the rest of the hobby, and collectors started looking at cards that otherwise were really not looked at. And we saw runs start to happen. We saw runs also happen because of documentaries, right? I mean, the Michael Jordan effect is a major one. His documentary made his rookie card exponentially explode. You started seeing that with baseball cards. You saw it with Mark McGwire, with Sammy Sosa, with their documentaries. And there was a number of other documentaries that either have come out or are set to come out because stations like ESPN and MLB Network were looking for content because there's no sports news, there's no sports games. And so documentaries are things that really get people's attention, especially folks in the hobby that enjoyed those types of players growing up. Number 3, because there were no sports, there was no sports gambling. So folks in the hobby may also like, you know, gambling on a game or two. You may use FanDuel or one of the, you know, websites, or you may just bet with your friends. But now there's no opportunity for gambling. And when you think about it, sports cards, things like opening packs, it's really another form of gambling or going to a casino. You're putting in your money, hoping to get a pack that has what we call a hit, or the card that you're looking for magically in the pack, and you want to feel like you spent less on the pack and you hit this card that's worth so much more money, and that's a form of gambling. And so with sports gambling out of the picture, again, what other things could now occupy that type of person's time? And so purchasing cards in the hobby certainly did occupy people's time, and that was another really important one. Number 4, along the same lines as gambling, there was no fantasy baseball, no fantasy sports. And I myself, I'm a huge fantasy baseball fan. I played fantasy sports all my life. I'm sure many of you listening are also fantasy baseball and fantasy sports fans. But again, because there's no season, there is no fantasy sports. And so every morning, if you're a fantasy baseball fan, you would be attuned to checking your lineup, checking the stats, looking at the waiver wire, picking up players, and it was kind of a daily routine. What people started doing was looking at eBay and looking at the recent sales and seeing what cards sold and seeing what cards increased in value, decreased in value, and that became the new daily routine. And so all of those things together was yet another reason why the hobby had more people with more time and more focus to spend on it, which was a very, very important reason. Obviously, MLB not having a season is the biggest reason of all. Number 5, PSA and the grading cards shutting down and reopening. Now, when COVID-19 really hit, California was obviously a major spot that had the lockdown come first. And PSA is based out of California. And so it was a short period of time. It was only a couple of weeks, I believe, if I remember right, where PSA's offices were shut. And all of the cards that were either mailed in prior, I had subs that were caught up in this for many months myself, or the ones that were just getting sent in or just getting dropped off were at a complete halt. And so their backlog of inventory kept growing and growing and growing and growing. And so because of that, there weren't new cards that were turning around and appearing on the market. So the market kind of stopped for a while, because typically what would happen is you would get a new set of cards that comes out, gets printed, people open the packs, people send in the cards to PSA, those PSA cards come back, they get listed on eBay, they get listed on all these different platforms, the prices start to drive. Without that, Now everything kind of just stayed the same for a while. And so it let you look across, kind of similar to the whole concept of looking at 80s instead of modern. It let you look across and let you sort of digest, because now you couldn't, either artificially inflate or deflate the price based on the number of cards that are getting sent in and sent back from PSA. So them closing was a big deal, and that sort of fortified the market. In a way, it kind of, lessened the supply, but the demand was still there. And so that was another very important one. Then when they reopened, then the floodgates slowly started to open again, because they did open earlier than I know I would have expected. And lastly, number 6, again, during the COVID-19 lockdown, when this first happened, it completely threw off the year's schedule of card releases from Topps, from Panini, from all different companies. And so printing stopped. And so kind of along the same lines as PSA cards not flooding the market, new sets for 2020 stopped printing. And so if you looked at all the releases that were scheduled, let's say back in January, and you looked out over the year of what's coming and when, there was a giant pause and a delay in all of the releases. I think Topps Series 2, which I personally was surprised actually did come out when it did, was delayed by about, I think, 2 months from originally where it was planned. I think it was to Topps' detriment to release it. I would have waited until if the season started, but again, that's another topic for another day. But when the cards stopped being printed, then again, the supply started to dry up. And again, it gave people focus on older cards, different cards that weren't always in the mainstream. And so all of these combined, and then you factor in on top of these 6 items, world events and news, and obviously if your family was affected by COVID-19 with health issues or not, if you were lucky enough to have a job or lost a job, all those things in the world factored in as well. But that's where you start to think about the stock market and when it increased. And so when there's confidence from the stock market, then there was actually confidence in secondary markets like the trading card market. And so all those things together really created, and I would say, even though I sort of predicted this, a somewhat unexpected perfect storm for the hobby. Now, I certainly hope that the momentum stays. I hope that the hobby remains sustainable. I love it just like all of you guys do. And if there is that second wave of the pandemic, I'm gonna have to, make another video and really be thoughtful on how that might go, and my thoughts on how that might go. I haven't really thought about it yet. But all in all, very happy to see that the hobby had done so well over the last couple months. Also happy to see that the United States is starting to come out of the pandemic, even though we're seeing numbers start to go back up over the summer. We all hope and pray that that goes well too. But that's it, guys. Those are the 6 reasons why the hobby and the sports card market really did thrive during a global pandemic when it probably had no business doing so from anybody else's point of view. I certainly am happy about it, and I hope you are too. So thanks again, guys. As always, Parlay J, like, subscribe. Please put your comment below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree, disagree. Every comment that I see, I respond to. Love to hear from you guys. Thanks as always. Parlay J, take care, spike your hair. See you next time.